Eleanor was in the Morrison family office hallway, touching up her lipstick in front of the mirror, when she heard the raised voices. She stopped, frowning. Daniel was shouting, and Daniel never shouted. "How dare you tell me this on the day I asked the woman of my life to marry me?" Eleanor's heart raced. She recognized the other voice immediately. "Do you have any idea how much of a jerk, selfish and narcissistic you're being, Ethan? Illy liked you for 3 damn years. And you were always an idiot to her." Ethan. It was Ethan. The same Ethan she cried over for countless nights. The same one who ignored her, and now, on her engagement day with Daniel, was confessing what she had waited to hear for so long. "Do you remember prom night? When you made her believe you'd take her and simply left her waiting at home, alone, while you showed up with someone else?" She cried for days. "And you know who stayed by her side? Me. It was always me." Each word cut like a knife. She leaned against the wall, unable to move. Her hands trembled. Her legs no longer felt steady. "Daniel, I know this is hard, but I needed to say it. I can't hide how much I like Ely anymore. I'm completely in love with her." Eleanor closed her eyes. She had waited for these words for years, dreamed of this moment. But now that it was finally happening, all she felt was a strange pain in her chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't confusion. It was anger. And bitter relief. Because now she knew, she was no longer the girl who begged for love. And he only saw her worth when she had already chosen herself. But to understand how everything led to this moment, you need to go back in time with me. Because this story doesn't begin with a marriage proposal. It begins with a girl who felt invisible. Eleanor always had a sweet, discreet, but intense way about her. She was the type of woman who felt too much and spoke too little. And maybe that's why no one ever noticed, or maybe pretended not to notice, what she felt for Ethan Morrison. Ethan was the older brother, brilliant, ambitious, vain. Since young, he said he would be the most respected lawyer in his father's company. Eleanor admired him. She fell in love not just with his intelligence, but also with his easy smile, his confidence, the way he entered places as if he was certain he belonged there. She spent 3 years nurturing that feeling in silence. 3 years getting dressed up hoping he would notice. 3 years interpreting every message, every look, every kindness as a sign of hope. But the truth is that Ethan only saw her when he needed something. Help with studies, advice, or comfort between one relationship and another. She was the nice girl, the available friend, the comfortable presence, but never the chosen one. Daniel, the younger brother, saw it all up close. He knew. He knew about the unrequited love, knew about the hidden tears, and knew that, as much as it hurt to admit, Eleanor deserved much more than what she was living. The breaking point came at prom night. Ethan had implied he would take her, even without ever saying it directly. Eleanor spent what little she had on a blue dress, did her hair, her makeup, and waited. She waited anxiously, thinking that night would be different, that he would finally see her. But Ethan didn't show up. She found out later that he went with Evelyn Chambers, the mayor's daughter, the beautiful and perfect Evelyn, who appeared last minute and, as always, took the place that was never really Eleanor's, but that she always hoped to occupy. That night, Daniel was the one who showed up at her door. He found Eleanor sitting on the porch, the dress wrinkled, eyes swollen, face colorless. "He doesn't deserve you," he said, sitting beside her. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked without looking at him. "Because someone needs to be." From then on, Daniel began to get closer. Without rush, without demands, without clear intentions. Just presence. He remembered the details that Ethan ignored. He brought coffee when he knew she was staying up all night studying. He sent messages just to ask if she had eaten. He brought flowers, sunflowers, always sunflowers, even without a special occasion. "Why do you do this?" she asked one day with a bouquet in her hands. "Because I pay attention." But Eleanor was still trapped in the past. Even with all of Ethan's absences, even with such clear signs that he would never see her as a woman, she insisted on blaming herself. She thought that if she were prettier, thinner, more interesting, maybe he would change his mind. She went on absurd diets, cut her hair in a way she didn't like, tried to mold herself to his taste. And him? He kept showing up when he needed her, disappeared when he didn't. Daniel watched all of this with a heavy heart. He knew she deserved more. He knew she was wasting time with a man who only knew how to receive, but didn't know how to give anything in return. Until one day he couldn't take it anymore. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm in love with you. Have been for years." She froze. "Daniel, don't joke about this." "I'm not joking. You don't see it, but I do. I see who you really are. And I see how blind Ethan is. I can't stand watching you destroy yourself for someone who never valued you. And it was at that moment that something in her began to change. That night, Eleanor looked at her bedroom ceiling in silence. She thought about everything. The years of waiting. The silences. The times she cried alone, thinking the problem was with her. And she finally understood that it wasn't. The problem was never her. It was raining that Monday. Eleanor's bedroom window was covered with drops slowly trickling down, as if the sky was also exhausted. She held the bouquet of sunflowers that Daniel had left at the door with a note tied with golden ribbon. To brighten your day. Like you brighten mine. Signed with handwriting she would recognize even with her eyes closed. It was there, in that simple instant, without an audience or grand declarations, that Eleanor began to see what was always there. Daniel. Always Daniel. She remembered all the times he showed up without being called. The way he paid attention. How he knew she liked chamomile tea with honey and not coffee, even when everyone offered coffee. She remembered the day she arrived late to class and without saying a word, he pushed a muffin in her direction, as if he knew she had left without eating. His look when she laughed nervously during presentations. The way he looked at her, as if she were something precious. That week she called him to talk. In the park, under the yellowed autumn leaves, the two walked in silence for a few minutes. The air was cold, but there was something warming from within. Eleanor turned to him with steady eyes but a choked voice. "Do you still want to talk about that thing you said the other day?" she asked in an almost whispered tone. "I always did," Daniel replied with a contained smile, as if he were holding his heart in his hands. "Then kiss me." That's what she said. Simple. Direct. And he didn't hesitate. The kiss wasn't explosive. It wasn't the teenage movie kiss with rain and dramatic soundtrack. It was better. It was the kind of kiss that calms. That holds. That promises. When his lips moved away from hers, he whispered with his forehead against hers, "Want to date me?" "Since you came with that muffin," Eleanor replied with a shy smile. The days that followed seemed tinted with another color. Daniel was different from everything she had known. He didn't make her doubt. Didn't make her wait. He showed up. Every day. He brought flowers for no reason. Made playlists with songs she mentioned without meaning to. He discovered a place in the countryside with a sunflower field just to take her there on her birthday. "How did you know I always dreamed of coming here?" she asked, looking around like a child. "You said it once while eating cake in your grandmother's kitchen, and I listened," he replied, holding her hand carefully. With Daniel, Eleanor felt safe. Beautiful even in sweatpants. Desired even without makeup. Valued even without making any effort beyond being who she always was. A friend of hers commented one day while they ate ice cream on the park bench, "You're different. You're more alive. Radiant." Eleanor smiled and replied, "It's that now I understand that true love doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you." With Daniel, she didn't need to wonder if she was enough. Because he made sure to remind her all the time that she was everything. In the kitchen, on the couch, in the car, on good and bad days, Daniel was constant. And that was so rare, so precious, that she began to wonder how she could have spent so much time begging for attention from someone who never intended to stay. She looked at Daniel one night while he prepared clumsy pancakes for dinner. The batter was stuck to the pan and he tried to disguise the disaster with laughter. It was at that instant, seeing the man who was always there trying to make pancakes just because she mentioned missing childhood breakfast, that she knew. "I love you," she said with a firm voice and teary eyes. Daniel stopped everything, held the spatula like it was a flower and looked at her as if it were the first time. "What did you say?" he asked as if he wanted to hear it again just to keep every syllable. "I love you, Daniel. Completely. In a way I didn't even know existed." He hugged her tight. His scent mixed with vanilla and pancake batter was now the smell of her house. Her home. "I love you too," he murmured. "So much that sometimes it even scares me. But with you, even fear is beautiful." Eleanor closed her eyes and thought, this is how love should be. Without doubts. Without games. Just presence. Just truth. And for the first time in a long time she felt peace. Ethan Morrison's life seemed perfect. At least, in the eyes of those who saw from the outside. At 26, he was about to become a partner in his father's firm, Morrison and Associates, one of the most respected in the city. His name was mentioned with a tone of reverence in the company corridors and social circles. Invitations to prestigious events arrived like playing cards in a magician's hands, stacking up on his ebony desk. On his wrist, a latest generation Rolex. In the garage, cars that seemed sculpted by the wind. And beside him, paraded Cassandra Montenegro, a sought-after model, beautiful, famous, with thousands of followers on social media and a marked presence in social columns. They were the couple of the moment. Beautiful, successful, admired. The type of pair that makes others think they won at life, that they reached the apex of human existence. But no one saw the silences between one photo and another. The shallow conversations that dragged like quicksand. The rehearsed smiles for the paparazzi lenses, for envious friends, for the very facade they had meticulously built. Behind the veneer of perfection, Ethan felt an echo, a distant buzz of emptiness that at first he ignored. He attributed it to stress, to the exhausting routine of advocating high-profile cases, to the pressure of maintaining his impeccable image. At first, Ethan felt like the luckiest man in the world. Every admiring look, every whisper of envy fed his ego. "Dude, how did you get that woman?" his friends asked with a mix of covetousness and respect. "She's incredible. You two together look like you stepped out of an advertisement. You like that? Being desired, talked about, revered." This external validation was the oxygen he seemed to need, proof that he was on the right path, on top of the world. He believed, with unshakable faith, that having everything society valued was synonymous with happiness. But the charm began to unravel slowly. Not dramatically, with an explosive breakup or sudden epiphany. It just began to weigh. The lightness promised by the perfect life transformed into an invisible burden. The dinners at starred restaurants were a succession of dishes that looked like untouchable works of art and conversations about Cassandra's next designer collection. The paradisiacal trips were a marathon of Instagram photos, where the landscape served only as a backdrop for the perfect image of the perfect couple. On their anniversary, he wanted to take her to a small trattoria hidden in the downtown alleys. It was a simple Italian restaurant, without the glamour of the city's flashing lights, but with a smell of fresh basil and tomato sauce that reminded him of his childhood, the noisy lunches at his grandmother's house. He imagined her smile, the way she would relax in that welcoming environment. Cassandra stopped at the door, looked with an almost offended air, nose upturned, and said, "You can't be serious, baby. I'm not going into a place that doesn't even have a vegan menu." And the lighting? Horrible for photos. He gave in. As always. And they spent the night on a modern rooftop with minimalist dishes that looked more like decoration, tiny portions of culinary art that cost a fortune. Cassandra took 20 photos before taking the first bite, adjusting the angle, lighting, the perfect pose. Ethan ate in silence, missing the rustic lasagna he used to order when it was just him and his grandmother, the simplicity of a meal without pretension. The sophisticated food turned to ash in his mouth, and the bubbling champagne seemed bitter. There was also the beach episode. He had planned a weekend getaway to an exclusive resort, away from the city's hustle and bustle. Ethan dreamed of enjoying the sea, the salty breeze, the freedom of water against skin, long walks on the sand, the silence that only the ocean can offer. But Cassandra spent the weekend locked in the hotel room after breaking a fake nail. She said her image was ruined and that this was almost a professional emergency, a catastrophe that could affect her advertising contracts. Ethan spent the afternoon trying to find an emergency salon in the small coastal town, calling everywhere, feeling like a fool. He couldn't find one. He ended up walking alone on the sand, the sun already beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and purple tones. He saw a couple jumping waves fully clothed, laughing like children, hair wet, faces illuminated by genuine joy. And he remembered Eleanor. The way she said the sea healed any sadness. The spontaneous way she lived, throwing herself into things without fear of messing up her hair or ruining her makeup. The comparison began there. A whisper, almost imperceptible. But he didn't immediately perceive the depth of that contrast, just felt a slight discomfort. It was at a family lunch weeks later that the realization hit with a dull thud, like a stone thrown into a dry well. It was the grandmother's birthday. The house was full, noisy, with the smell of homemade food and the buzz of mixed voices, like in the old days. Eleanor appeared with Daniel, wearing a simple yellow dress and hair pulled back in a messy bun, some loose strands framing her face. She laughed loudly, an unrestrained laugh, helped serve the plates, told stories with a captivating ease that held everyone's attention. Her eyes shone in a way he hadn't seen for a long time, or perhaps had never really noticed. Everyone seemed happier with her around, as if her presence radiated a light of its own that filled the environment. Ethan watched her from afar, with a plate in hand and a tightness in his chest that he couldn't understand. A strange sensation of familiarity and loss. His mother commented between bites of corn cake with guava, a sweet she prepared only on special occasions. "Eleanor is special. Always was. Daniel was very lucky." Those words fell like a stone in his stomach. Heavy. Painful. Ethan looked at his brother, Daniel, who was beside Eleanor, eyes fixed on her, as if she were the center of everything, the entire universe revolving around that easy smile and loose laughter. And then he realized, he never looked at Eleanor that way. Never with the same reverence, with the same devotion. But Daniel did. And Eleanor returned that look with a surrender he had never received from her. A surrender that he, in his blindness, had never realized she was capable of. Later that day, Ethan tried to talk to Cassandra. They were in the car, returning to the luxurious apartment. He said he had been feeling strange. That maybe the path he chose wasn't right. He talked about the emptiness that corroded him inside, about the tiredness of keeping up appearances. About the old dream of being a writer, the one he left behind to follow what was expected of him, his father's legacy, the brilliant career, the safe path. Cassandra widened her eyes, incredulous. Baby, are you okay? Are you delirious? You have everything. You're one of the most promising lawyers in the city and date one of the most beautiful women of the moment, she said, referring to herself with the same naturalness of someone commenting on the weather, as if it were an unquestionable fact, part of her enviable resume. Ethan remained silent. The air inside the car seemed dense, unbreathable. Why would anyone trade this to become a writer? She continued, her voice rising in disgust. A poor and depressed writer? Give me a break. He didn't respond. Just got out of the car, took the house key and left without looking back. The conversation was a dead end. There was no space for vulnerability, for doubt, for dreams. On the way back he called Eleanor. Said he wanted to talk. Alone. She, with the same care as always, with the soft voice that seemed to carry the calm of a river, accepted. They arranged to meet at a discreet corner cafe, where the smell of cinnamon and coffee seemed to calm everything around, a refuge from the noise of his own mind. You're acting strange, she commented, looking into his eyes with that look that pierced defenses, that saw beyond facades. Eleanor had the gift of seeing people's souls. I don't know who I am anymore, Ethan confessed, his voice choked, the weight of a lifetime of expectations falling on his shoulders. I think I followed so many others' expectations that I never stopped to think about what I wanted. He felt strangely naked, exposed. Eleanor listened to him in silence as she always did, without interrupting, without judging. Just presence. Have you ever thought that maybe being a lawyer was never your real dream? She asked gently, as if she were untying a knot with her fingertips. Maybe you just wanted to be accepted. Validated. But that's not the same as being happy. He was speechless. Those words hit him with the force of lightning. And in that silence he realized something. She no longer looked at him with the eyes of before. There was no more adoration, that blind admiration that inflated him. There was no more waiting, that silent plea for a look, for a gesture. She just saw him. Really. As a human being with his flaws and pains, not as the idealized hero of her dreams. And when Eleanor spoke about Daniel, her eyes shone in a way he had never seen, not even when she talked to him. He listens to me, sees me, and makes me want to be better. But without ever making me feel like I'm not enough. Ethan felt a bitter taste in his mouth. He never made her feel that. On the contrary. She spent years wondering if she was good enough, mutilating herself to fit into a box he never really invited her to enter. While now she knew she was enough. That she was more than enough. She overflowed. That night Ethan faced his dark room's ceiling and understood. He wasn't just sorry for his choices and how he treated Eleanor. He was late. And maybe it was irreversibly too late. The happiness he sought so much outside was, in fact, on the other side of the room, in a heart he had the chance to have, but didn't know how to value. He lost her. And the fear of losing, which he used to control his world, was now a reality that consumed him inside. It was supposed to be just a family lunch. Eleanor arrived smiling, with the lightness of someone who believes they're going to celebrate the Morrison brothers' grandmother's birthday, a simple event full of affection. Daniel held her hand with a shine in his eyes that she hadn't seen for a while, a reflection of the pure and unpretentious happiness he radiated beside her. She was light, with hair pulled back in a delicate bun that insisted on coming undone in some loose strands, heart calm, without the slightest shadow of the past, without the urgency to be seen or validated. Nothing seemed out of place on that day that promised to be just a common chapter of joy. The house was full of voices, contagious laughter echoing through the rooms, smells of fresh food and affection spread through every corner, a sensory tapestry of home. The familiar buzz was the sound of peace for Eleanor. Daniel pulled her by the arm, his voice low in her ear, loaded with a sweetness that made her smile inside. After dessert, I have a surprise for you. She smiled, without imagining the magnitude of the upheaval that was about to happen. Her mind was only on grandmother's apple pie and light conversation with the aunts. Hours later, everyone was on the porch. The afternoon sun painted the scene with warm tones, and grandmother laughed loudly at some joke, hands on her belly. The children ran with shoes in hand, their thin laughter mixing with the buzz of insects. And then, suddenly, amid that scene of pure normalcy and relaxed happiness, Daniel knelt. Eleanor felt time stop. The air seemed to become denser, the surrounding noise disappeared. Her eyes fixed on him, the world reducing to that single point. Kneeling on the green grass with the sun illuminating his face, Daniel held a small velvet box. "You brought light where there was shadow before," he began with a slightly trembling voice, but firm in conviction. "And you taught me that true love isn't made of empty promises, but of presence, of listening, of every small detail. Eleanor Santos, will you marry me?" She didn't even try to contain the tears that flowed hot down her face. The answer came before thought, an unquestionable truth that sprouted from her soul. "Yes," she said with a voice choked by emotion, but loaded with a conviction she had never felt before. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The family exploded in applause and emotion, tears mixing with smiles. There was a love there that was good to see, that inspired, that overflowed with authenticity. Simple, honest, beautiful, pure. But on the other side of the porch, almost imperceptible, Ethan watched in silence. His eyes, once full of existential emptiness, were now teary, a shine of something between jealousy and recognition emerging in them. No one noticed his teary eyes, focused on the scene of happiness he was no longer part of. No one noticed when he walked away, going down the house steps with steps too firm for someone trembling inside, a knot tightening in his throat. He knew he needed to do something no matter the cost. That was the point of no return. That night Ethan called his brother. His voice sounded stronger than he felt. He said he needed to talk. Alone. It was urgent. He asked them to meet at their father's old office, the place where so many family decisions were made, where the weight of the Morrison legacy was most palpable. A symbolic place for what was about to happen. Daniel accepted, without imagining the bomb that would come, the implicit betrayal that hung in the air. The room was silent when Ethan closed the door, the muffled sound of the lock clicking like a shot in the emptiness of the environment. Shadows danced on the walls, projected by the weak street light. Ethan seemed nervous, fists clenched, but at the same time determined, as if he were executing an inevitable sentence. Daniel sat in the dark leather armchair, crossed his arms and waited, his look questioning, but without patience for beating around the bush. Ethan walked around the room as if trying to escape from himself, a caged animal, his steps echoing in the oppressive silence, until he finally spoke, words torn from his soul like barbs. "I need to tell you something. And I know you're going to hate me for this. Maybe you'll never forgive me." Daniel remained silent. This wasn't any ordinary apology. The air seemed denser in there, loaded with an almost palpable tension. "I'm in love with Eleanor." The words were said with a frightening calm, almost an acceptance of his own fate. But the impact was like a bomb, exploding in the environment, pulverizing the peace Daniel had barely conquered. Daniel laughed, but it was a short, dry laugh without humor, disbelief and anger mixed. "This can only be a joke. Is this some kind of bad taste prank?" Ethan looked him in the eyes, courage coming from a place he didn't know existed. "It's not. I tried to ignore it. I tried to hide it. I fought against this with all my strength. But I can't. I love her. I really love her." Daniel got up slowly with a rigid body as if he were holding the world on his back, every muscle tense. The vein in his forehead pulsed. "You had 3 years," he said, with eyes shining with contained but overwhelming anger, voice low but cutting like a sharp blade. 3 years to see who she was. To see her value. 3 years when she blamed herself for not being enough for you, while you played at being the inaccessible guy, the unreachable prize. Daniel's voice began to rise, frustration and pain breaking free. "Do you remember prom night? When you made her believe you would pick her up and simply didn't show up? She spent 3 days crying on the living room couch, feeling like the most insignificant person in the world. And who stayed there with her, wiping the tears and trying to glue the pieces back together? Me. I was always there." Ethan tried to speak, stammer some defense, but Daniel didn't let him, his words running him over, the dam of grievances and truths bursting. "You have no idea how much she destroyed herself trying to be the woman you wanted. She went on absurd diets, cut her hair in a way she didn't like, compared herself to all your perfect girlfriends. You knew, Ethan. You always knew she loved you. You just ignored it because it didn't serve you. I know I was wrong, Ethan said, now with a lower voice, almost a whisper, strength draining in face of the naked truth. I behaved like an idiot. But I needed to be honest with you. I can't pretend anymore, I can't keep this inside. Honest? Daniel repeated, giving a bitter laugh that didn't reach his eyes, only reflecting pain. On my engagement day you decide to be honest? What kind of brother does this? What kind of man is so selfish as to destroy his own brother's happiness and the woman he claims to love? Daniel's anger was now a devouring fire. You're only being honest because you realized what you lost. It's not love. It's regret and wounded ego. I just needed to know if she still feels something for me. Ethan murmured, voice weak, hope dying with each of Daniel's words. Daniel took a step forward, fists clenched. For a moment, it seemed the blow would come, that physical violence would be the only relief for so much pain and betrayal. But then a third voice interrupted everything, icy and firm, cutting the air like an ice blade. You don't need to ask. I can answer myself. Eleanor stood at the door, light from the room casting an aura around her silhouette. Face pale, steady look, teary eyes, but without tears of sadness, just the intensity of a newly made decision. She had heard everything, every word, every accusation, every desperate confession. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, dense. Ethan froze, his eyes widened with terror and shame. Daniel didn't move, just watched her, surprised but relieved by her presence. Eleanor took a deep breath, as if gathering every piece of her strength. Every word that came next carried the weight of years of choked pain, of silent humiliation, of unrequited love that finally found its voice. What I feel for you, Ethan, is nothing, she said with a trembling voice, but with an unshakable conviction that echoed in the empty room. Absolutely nothing. Not anger. Not hurt. Just emptiness. Ethan took a step toward her, extending his hand, a silent appeal, but she raised her hand, a clear gesture of limit, of no more. I spent years of my life trying to understand what was wrong with me, wondering what I needed to change for you to look at me. I came to hate myself, to see myself as smaller than I was. I thought I was invisible, insufficient, or that love was always this roller coaster of expectations and disappointments. Her voice carried the scar of every tear shed. She looked at Daniel, and her eyes softened for a second, a shine of gratitude and affection filling them. But then he appeared. And he showed me that the problem was never with me. That I didn't need to be someone else to deserve to be loved. That true love doesn't demand you change who you are. It celebrates. It welcomes. And she turned to face Ethan again, now with a calm that cut more than any scream, more than any accusation. It was the calm of liberation. You don't want me because you love me. You want me because you realized you can no longer have me. You want what's good for Daniel, what makes you envious, what now has value. But I'm not a trophy. Ethan tried to say something, his voice failed, a knot in his throat prevented him from forming any sound. He saw her truly now, but it was too late. Eleanor approached, maintaining her upright, dignified posture. You liked having me there, nearby, as an option. But you never had the courage to really choose me. Because I didn't fit into your perfection showcase. I was good enough to listen to you, to be your safe harbor, to give you advice and comfort, but not to accompany you to social events. I was pretty, but not the kind of pretty you displayed with pride. I was the girl for bad days, not for glory days. She took a deep breath before the last sentence, pure air filling her lungs, the weight of years being released. And now that you realized what you lost, you want to come back as if nothing happened. As if I were still that girl who cried for you. But I'm not that girl anymore. And you no longer have a place here. There's no more space for you in my life, nor in my heart. She extended her hand to Daniel, who said nothing. Just held it. That touch, firm and secure, was the answer to all questions, proof that he was there, unshakable. Together they left the office, leaving Ethan alone, with the echo of his own choices filling the crushing silence of the room. The bitter taste of regret was all that remained. The week that followed was one of almost deafening silence. Ethan disappeared for a few days, a ghost that refused to be seen. He didn't show up at the office, his calls went to voicemail, and he didn't respond to messages, as if he had evaporated from everyone's life. Daniel didn't mention what happened to anyone, a silent pact of protection. Eleanor didn't either, determined not to give more power to the shadow of the past. The two just moved forward, like those who choose, in silence and with conviction, to preserve their own peace. They knew what they had and the invaluable worth of that choice. That Saturday, the Morrison house was taken by a soft splendor of white flowers and natural light that invaded every room. It was wedding day. Eleanor walked back and forth in the room, the wedding dress still hanging on the hanger, a target of lace and pure silk. Hair semi-up, some loose strands framing her face, eyes shining with a peculiar mix of contained emotion and deep calm. It wasn't the nervous anxiety of traditional brides. It was a lightness, a serenity that came from the certainty of her choices. While helping her put on the pearl earrings, her mother commented, eyes teary with pride, "You're serene. I've never seen you so at peace, so radiant." Eleanor smiled slightly, a smile that reached her eyes. "It's because I'm certain. Absolutely. There isn't a hint of doubt in my heart." Outside, Daniel adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his hands steady, but a slight tremor ran through his body. He breathed deeply as if trying to contain the immensity of happiness that threatened to overflow, and at the same time not let it get lost, but keep it there, present in every fiber of his being. The ceremony was in the family house garden, a perfect setting under the spring sun, surrounded by countless sunflowers that rose in their yellow majesty and sincere smiles. Everything was simple but of touching and intimate beauty. Like their love, without great pomp but deep and true. The guests were few, the closest ones, those who witnessed Eleanor's journey and Daniel's constancy. At the time of vows, Eleanor held Daniel's hands, which were warm and steady in hers. Her voice was choked with emotion, but firm, full of a conviction she never thought she would feel. "With you I learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's not about fitting into an ideal that doesn't belong to you. It's about being seen, welcomed and loved exactly as you are, with all your flaws and your light. Thank you, Daniel, for making me feel safe every day. For constantly reminding me that I'm enough, that I'm worthy of everything you offer me." Daniel closed his eyes for a second, as if sealing all of that in his heart, recording every syllable in his memory. When he opened them, his eyes shone with a devotion that made Eleanor tremble. "With you I learned that true love is quiet but deeply rooted. It doesn't shout to the four winds to be noticed, but sustains, nourishes, flourishes in the silence of everyday life. You made me believe in things I didn't even know I wanted to live, showed me a world of possibilities I never dreamed of. And I promise to remind you every day in every gesture and every word, how precious you are to me, how much you transformed my life." At the time of the famous celebrant phrase, "If anyone has anything against this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," there was a tense, almost palpable silence. Many people looked around discreetly, a chill in their stomach, a silent expectation. They expected Ethan to appear to make a final drama, a last act of selfishness. But he didn't come. Or at least that's what everyone thought. Across the street, hidden by the generous shade of an old tree, Ethan watched in silence. He was in jeans and t-shirt, hair slightly disheveled, eyes teary with a pain that was different from everything he had ever felt. It wasn't the pain of wounded ego but of late acceptance. Heart tight, yes, but with a new understanding. He saw the woman he never had the courage to choose, and who, in some deep layer, was like a sister he ignored. Say yes to the brother who always had the courage to love with his whole heart, without fear, without reservations. He saw Daniel, his brother, the one who always lived in his shadow, ascend like a sun, bathing Eleanor with a light he could never give. When Daniel and Eleanor kissed, a long kiss full of promises, Ethan looked away for an instant, chest tight. But, surprisingly, a sad smile, almost imperceptible, appeared on his lips. It was a smile of pain, yes, a pain he deserved to feel. But it was also honest. And full of something new, acceptance. He knew he was no longer part of that story. His chapter with Eleanor had been painfully closed by his own choices. And for the first time, this didn't fill him with anger, nor desperation for having lost. Just with a deep respect for the happiness he witnessed and for her courage to rebuild herself. That same night he sent 2 letters. One to Daniel. Another to Eleanor. The handwriting was firm but simple, written with the pen he used to sign contracts, but now loaded with a new truth. "Daniel, you were right. I wasn't a good brother and much less a good man to Eleanor. I failed you both in ways I can only see now. But today I understood. I understood that love isn't conquest, isn't a power game or exhibition. It's care. It's dedication. It's presence. You love her with your whole being, and that became clear even to someone who arrived too late and was too blind to see. I'm sorry for everything. For every mistake, for every pain I caused. And congratulations for being the kind of man I couldn't be, but that I learned to admire. You two taught me more than any diploma, more than any law book. You taught me about what really matters in life. With affection. Ethan. Eleanor. You were the love I only understood when it was too late. The woman who was there all the time and I, in my blindness and selfishness, didn't know how to value. And as much as this hurts me, I needed to thank you. You taught me what true love is, even though it wasn't with me that you lived it. You showed me that presence is worth more than intention. And that true love doesn't weaken us, doesn't diminish us. It frees us. It makes us flourish. Today I begin a new life. Not to forget you because you will always be an important part of my learning. But to finally become someone who knows how to truly love, who knows how to recognize the other's value and their own. I wish all the happiness in the world for you and Daniel. With affection and respect. Ethan. Months later, Ethan traveled. Without fanfare, without grand farewells or parties. He went to Europe with a backpack on his back, a blank notebook and an old camera around his neck. The idea was to discover who he was without the Morrison surname, without the promising lawyer position and without the image he built to please others. It was a journey of self-discovery, of rebuilding himself. Eleanor and Daniel continued their lives with the tranquility of those who know what they want and have certainty in their choices. They made plans for the future, a future that seemed bright and full of promises. They bought a house in the countryside with a vast backyard. And of course they planted sunflowers in the garden, which grew tall and strong following the sun. She woke up every day beside someone who knew the name of the tea she liked, who knew when she needed silence and when she needed a hug. Someone who saw her in her totality, without demanding she be something she wasn't. He woke up every day beside the woman who brought color to the gray days of his life, who taught him to love in a way he never imagined possible. And, as improbable as it may seem to some, Ethan also found his own peace. He published a book 2 years later, a novel with the scent of truth, about a man who almost lost everything for not knowing how to see what really mattered, about regret and redemption. He dedicated it to the woman who taught him what love is, even without giving him a happy ending. And that was enough. Years later, on a quiet spring afternoon, Eleanor was sitting on the porch of the new house with a cup of hot tea in her hands. The garden was in bloom, a festival of colors and aromas, and the sunflowers swayed gently in the wind, as if they were dancing in celebration for her journey. Inside the house, Daniel laughed at some silly thing, the sound of his laughter filling the environment with joy and security while he stirred the pots, apron dirty with sauce. And she thought, with a serene smile, this is where everything led me. This is why so much pain needed to happen. So that she would finally learn to choose herself, to prioritize her own peace and happiness above any external validation. A little girl with big bright eyes ran through the yard with bare feet and hands dirty with earth, a small bundle of pure energy. Mommy? Look what I found. Eleanor crouched down, opened her arms and welcomed her daughter in her lap, the smell of earth and childhood filling her lungs. It's a 4-leaf clover, said the girl, with a pride that radiated from her small body. Then keep it safe, she replied, smiling. Because luck like that isn't found every day. And the real gift is knowing how to value it. Inside, Daniel watched them through the kitchen window with a corner-of-mouth smile, heart overflowing with gratitude. And he thought about how life had been generous with him. Not for giving everything he wanted because it wasn't always easy. But for giving exactly what he needed, Eleanor's love, the family they built, the peace of a simple and true life. On the other side of the ocean, Ethan walked alone through an old village in Italy, the cobblestone streets whispering millennial stories. He carried a leather notebook already filled, an old camera around his neck and a lightness in his soul that one only conquers after losing, and truly accepting that loss, transforming it into learning. He stopped in front of a stand of vibrant flowers and, almost by reflex, picked up a sunflower. He smiled. He still thought about her sometimes, yes. Not with corrosive regret or bitterness, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson, for the chance to rediscover himself. Some loves aren't born to be lived intensely or to have a romantic, happy ending. They're born to teach, to mold, to show a path that otherwise would never be seen. And Eleanor's story? It wasn't about a broken heart that found revenge or a fairy tale ending where everything fits perfectly. It was about a woman who, through pain and waiting, learned to see herself, to listen to herself, and above all to love herself. Who stopped chasing after those who ignored her and began to walk, with firm and confident steps, alongside those who saw her light, even when she herself saw herself in shadows. And that's the kind of love that lasts. Not the one that makes the heart race with anxiety, with doubt, with uncertainty. But the one that makes the chest warm with peace, with security, with belonging. Because the true happy ending isn't being chosen by someone. It's choosing yourself first with all your strength and vulnerability. And then, Accepting being loved just the way you always deserved with a fullness that transcends any expectation.